The wedding cost $340,000. Nobody cried. Emily Carter stood at the altar in a dress her mother had chosen, holding flowers she hadn't picked, next to a man she had spoken to exactly 4 times. Daniel Reed, 38 years old. Single father. No company on record. No political connections. No explanation that made sense. The guests smiled for the cameras. Underneath the smiles, they were all thinking the same thing. What is the Carter family doing? She didn't look at him during the ceremony. Not once. There was nothing to look at. That was what she told herself. He was a placeholder. A signature on a document. A solution to a problem she hadn't caused and couldn't refuse. Daniel didn't look at her either. He just stood there. Still. Not the stillness of a nervous man holding himself together. Something else entirely. At midnight, while the reception music was still playing 1 floor below, 3 things happened at the same time. The stock market index, which had been bleeding for 11 straight days, quietly stabilized. Senator Morrison, her father's most aggressive opponent, announced his withdrawal from the upcoming race. No reason given. The National Herald, a paper that had run 17 negative pieces on her father in the last month, published an editorial calling for bipartisan cooperation. Emily was still in her heels when she heard it. Daniel's voice. Down the corridor. Low. Unhurried. Not asking. Telling. No, kill. Ha, parody. Pull the Thompson account. All of it. By morning. Then, silence. Then the soft click of a call ending. She stood in the hallway of her own wedding night, shoes in her hand, not moving. For the first time since she'd agreed to this, Emily Carter felt something she hadn't expected. Not anger. Not grief. Something colder. Who is this man? Senator Carter told his daughter on a Tuesday. Not at dinner. Not in the living room where the family had gathered for every important conversation since Emily was 9 years old. He told her in his office, behind a closed door, with his chief of staff standing in the corner like a piece of furniture that happened to breathe. A file on the desk. A photograph clipped to the top. His name is Daniel Reed, her father said. 38, clean record. No affiliations. Emily looked at the photograph. A man standing outside what appeared to be a hardware store. Not posed. Candid. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at something to the left of the frame. One hand in his jacket pocket, the other holding a child's backpack. You're not serious, she said. Her father folded his hands on the desk. That gesture. She had watched that gesture her entire life. The slow, deliberate fold that meant the decision had already been made, and this conversation was a formality. The Thompson coalition is moving against us, he said. The Kellerman funds have been frozen. We don't know how or by whom. If we go into the November cycle looking unstable, we lose everything. Not just the seat. Everything. So your solution is to marry me off. My solution is optics. A quiet family. A low-profile match that says we're not scrambling. He paused. Reed has nothing. No company. No record. No one who will ask questions about him, which means no one will ask questions about us. The chief of staff shifted slightly in the corner. Emily looked at the photograph again. The child's backpack in the man's hand. Small. Pink dotty. A cartoon bear on the front. He has a daughter, she said. 6 years old. The mother is not in the picture. She set the photograph down. I won't do it. Her father looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, quietly, and it was the quiet that did it, not the words. If you don't, I will not be the only one who falls. She moved into the house on a Saturday morning in October. It was a real house, not the Millfield address she'd expected from the file. Somehow that was worse. She had prepared herself for something bleak, something that would make it easier to keep her walls up. Instead, a porch with 2 chairs, a maple tree that had gone fully red, a child's bicycle leaning against the side gate. Daniel carried one of her boxes inside without being asked. She didn't thank him. He didn't seem to expect it. They established their arrangement without ever discussing it. She took the bedroom at the end of the hall. He took the one near the stairs. She kept her schedule on a separate calendar app she never shared. She came home at different times each night. She did not ask about his day. He did not offer it. He cooked in the mornings and left a plate on the counter. Not for her, or at least she told herself it wasn't for her. But it was always there, and it was always still warm. She ate it standing at the kitchen counter on the 4th morning, jacket already on, keys in her other hand. She told herself it was just efficient. On the 3rd morning, a Wednesday, she came downstairs at 6:45 and found someone sitting on the kitchen floor. A small person, cross-legged, eating cereal from a bowl balanced on one knee, watching something on an old tablet propped against the cabinet door. The girl looked up. She had Daniel's eyes. That same quality of stillness, not shy, not guarded, just completely, genuinely calm. "Are you my new mom?" she asked. "Dad said you'd be staying here for a while." Emily's hand found the counter behind her. "I'm not..." She stopped. Started again. "I'm Emily." "I'm Lily." The girl considered this exchange for a moment. "Dad makes the cereal with the banana slices on top. Did you want some?" Before Emily could answer, Daniel appeared in the doorway. He took in the scene in one glance, not alarmed, not embarrassed, just present. "Lily, let Emily get her coffee." "She wasn't getting coffee," Lily said reasonably. "She was just standing there." Daniel looked at Emily. 1 second. A look that didn't ask for anything. "Sorry," he said quietly. "It's fine," Emily said. She meant it to come out clipped. Professional, ... The tone she used in meetings when she wanted to end a conversation. But something about the way Lily had gone back to her cereal, completely unbothered, already watching her tablet again, one small foot tucked under her knee, made the word land differently than she'd intended. She stood at the counter for another 4 minutes after Daniel had guided Lily toward the back hallway. She wasn't waiting for anything. She just didn't move. The dinner happened on a Friday, the 2nd week. Senator Carter hosted what he called a working supper. 6 advisors, 2 lobbyists, a man from the state treasurer's office whose name Emily could never remember. Daniel sat at the far end of the table. Lily had already eaten and was upstairs. The conversation moved to the Whitmore infrastructure bill, a piece of legislation that had been stalled in committee for 11 weeks. 2 of the advisors had opinions. Then a third. The man from the treasurer's office said something about leverage and subcommittee chairs that made everyone nod as though he'd said something useful. There was a pause. Someone asked Daniel. In the way people ask questions they don't actually want answered. Politely, briefly, a small gesture toward inclusion. "What do you think, Daniel?" Daniel finished chewing, set down his fork. "The bill isn't the problem," he said. "The problem is that Senator Morrison is holding 3 votes and nobody's figured out what he actually wants. He's been signaling through the Kellerman intermediaries for 6 weeks. He's not waiting to be persuaded." A short pause. "He's waiting to be bought, and whoever buys him first owns the bill." Silence. Not the polite silence of people pretending to consider an opinion. The other kind, where people stop breathing for just a half second. Her father's chief of staff, a man named Gerald Marsh, who had been in politics for 23 years and wore it on his face, went very still. Daniel picked up his fork again. From upstairs, Lily called down asking if she could have the last of the apple juice. "Yes," Daniel called back without looking up from his plate. The conversation moved on, or tried to, but Emily watched Gerald Marsh take out his phone under the table and begin typing. She woke at 2:14 in the morning to the sound of a voice. Low, coming from the hallway. She lay still for a moment, listening through the dark. The house was quiet enough to carry sound. She could hear the heating system, a car passing outside, and underneath all of it, the flat, even cadence of a man who was not asking for anything. She opened her door 2 inches. "Stop all trades on the Dunmore portfolio. Everything. Hold until Friday." A pause. "I don't care what Heller says. Friday." Then nothing. The call was over. She stood at the 2-inch gap in her door for a long moment, then went back to bed. She opened her laptop and spent 40 minutes reading financial news she didn't fully understand, looking for she didn't know what. On Friday, a $9 billion acquisition between 2 pharmaceutical companies was suspended without explanation. She heard it by accident the following Monday. Her father in the hallway, speaking to Gerald Marsh in the low, careful voice he used when he didn't want to be overheard. She had come home early. Neither of them had heard her come in. "The Kellerman accounts," her father was saying. "They just opened back up. 3 weeks, nothing. Then Reed moves in by the following Tuesday." "Coincidence?" Marsh said. Her father didn't answer. She stood in the entryway for a moment, then walked quietly to the kitchen. The plate was on the counter, still warm. She sat down at the kitchen table, the first time she had sat down in this kitchen, rather than eating standing up with one hand already reaching for her keys, and looked at the plate for a long time. The Kellerman accounts had frozen 6 weeks before the wedding. She had assumed it was political pressure, an opponent's move. Everyone had assumed that. But she ran the timeline again in her head, slowly, carefully. 6 weeks before the wedding. 1 week after Daniel Reed had been selected. Her fork was halfway to her mouth before she realized her hand had picked it up. She set it back down. Who is this man? The question she'd stood with in the hallway on her wedding night. She'd almost managed to push it back down, back behind everything that was easier to think about. But it was here again now, sitting across the table from her in the quiet kitchen. This time it wasn't going anywhere. 3 weeks later, it started with a protest. 1,400 people outside the federal building on Mercer Street on a Thursday morning in November. The signs were professional, not the hand-painted kind. Printed, laminated. The kind that cost money. By noon, the crowd had doubled. By 3 o'clock, 3 network cameras were there, and every chyron said the same thing. Carter corruption scandal, calls for resignation grow. Her father didn't come out of his office that day. The market dropped 1/4% by close. Then another 2, the following morning. Gerald Marsh stopped making eye contact with anyone. The family's PR firm sent a 12-page crisis document that recommended, among other things, that Emily give a public statement distancing herself from her father's financial decisions. She read it once, closed the file, did not respond. On the 3rd day, she noticed Daniel was gone. Not gone. His car was still in the driveway. Lily was at school. Emily had seen her leave at 7:52, backpack over both shoulders, already talking to herself about something. But Daniel was simply not in the house. No note. No explanation. He came back at 4 in the afternoon, set his keys on the counter, poured a glass of water. Emily was at the kitchen table with her laptop and said nothing. That evening, the story changed. A financial journalist, someone Emily had never heard of, writing for a mid-sized outlet she'd never read, published a piece tracing the protests funding to 3 shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands, all of which connected back to a lobbying group with direct ties to the Thompson Coalition. The piece was detailed, specific, sourced in ways that were not easy to achieve. By the following morning, 2 of the 3 major networks had picked it up. By noon, the framing had flipped entirely. The protesters were no longer righteous. They were funded. The story was no longer about her father. It was about whoever had been pulling the strings behind the protests. Her father called it a miracle. Gerald Marsh called it good fortune. Emily opened a notes app on her phone and typed, Thursday, Nav 14. Daniel gone 8 a.m. 4 p.m. Story breaks Thursday evening. She scrolled up. Read the 2 entries above it. Octi 18, wedding night. Morrison withdrawal, market stabilized. Herald editorial. All within hours. Nav 6. Daniel gone 7 a.m., 11 a.m. Kellerman accounts unfrozen. Confirmed by father. She sat with the phone in her hand for a long time. She found him in the backyard the next morning. He was fixing the latch on the side gate. The one she'd noticed was loose her first week there. Lily was inside. The street was quiet. She crossed the yard and stopped a few feet away. Where do you go? She said. Not a question. A statement waiting to be answered. Daniel tested the latch. It held. He stood up. I took Lily to school, he said. Lily's school was closed yesterday. Teacher training day. She watched his face. I checked the school calendar 3 weeks ago. He turned to look at her. And that was the moment. She felt it land differently than anything before it. He wasn't looking through her the way he sometimes did, patient and distant, the way you look at weather. He was actually looking at her, taking her in. Something behind his eyes shifted, almost imperceptibly, like a door opening 1 inch. You've been keeping a log, he said. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. He was quiet for a moment. Then, you're learning to observe. That's not an answer. No, he said. It's not. He picked up his tools, walked back toward the house, and Emily stood at the side gate, the newly latched gate, with the cold morning air coming off the street, understanding 2 things at once. He hadn't denied it, and he wasn't afraid of her knowing. She hired the investigator on a Monday. His name was Paul Greer, former federal. Sorry. She'd used him twice before for background checks on political donors. Thorough, discreet, expensive. She told him she needed everything on Daniel Reed. Everything that existed. Greer called her on Saturday. He didn't ask to meet in person. He sent a single encrypted file to her secure email and a message that read, I won't be taking further work on this. I'm sorry. That was all. She opened the file at her desk with the door locked. Most of it was absence. That was the thing that stayed with her. Not what was there, but what wasn't. Before 2018, Daniel Reed existed the way a rumor exists. References without sources. Mentions without records. A lease agreement in Chicago that terminated in 2017. A single tax filing from 2016 that listed income from a category labeled consulting and a figure she had to read 3 times. Then nothing. A clean break. And after 2018, a new life built from scratch in Millfield. 1 photograph. Greer had found it in the archived digital files of a financial conference in Zurich, October 2015. The image quality was poor, taken from across a large room. 3 men in the center of the frame, mid-conversation. She recognized 2 of them immediately. The French finance minister, the deputy chancellor of Germany. The third man was Daniel. Younger, thinner, standing with the ease of someone who belonged at the center of any room he entered. The caption had been stripped from the original file, but in the metadata, buried in the information field, Greer had found a partial label. Dr. Lead architect. No last name. No title. No organization. She closed the laptop. Professor Alan Whitfield had been an economic advisor to 2 administrations, one of each party, which was either a sign of great integrity or great pragmatism, and Emily had never been sure which. He taught at Georgetown now. She had met him twice at her father's fundraisers. Both times he had seemed like someone who knew more than he said. She drove to Georgetown herself. Didn't tell her father. Didn't bring anyone. Whitfield met her in his office. Bookshelves floor to ceiling. A window with a view of nothing interesting. When she said Daniel's name, Whitfield went still in a way that had nothing to do with thought. He looked at the door, then at her. "How do you know that name?" he said. Not a question either. "He's my husband." Whitfield sat back in his chair. The leather made a sound. He looked at her for a long moment with an expression she couldn't fully read, somewhere between pity and something that looked almost like relief. "Are you familiar," he said slowly, "with what happened to the U.S. bond market in September 2018? Broadly. It almost didn't stabilize. Most people don't know how close it came. The models were projecting a cascade failure, the kind that takes 8 to 12 years to recover from." He folded his hands. "Someone intervened, built a containment structure across 3 separate financial systems in 11 days. We never found out who. The architecture was..." He paused, chose the word carefully. "Elegant. The way it worked depended not just on understanding the systems, but on understanding the people inside them." Emily sat very still. "We had a name for this person internally," Whitfield said. "Not a real name, just an initial, Dr. He looked at her. "The lead architect. We assumed it was a team. Most of my colleagues still do." "It wasn't a team," Emily said. Whitfield looked at her. "No," he said quietly. "I don't think it was." She drove home in silence, both hands on the wheel, the heater running, the radio off. The highway moved past her in a gray blur. She kept returning to the same number. 11 days. He had pulled a financial system back from the edge of collapse in 11 days. Alone. And then, disappeared entirely. And now he was fixing the latch on her side gate. He was in the living room when she got home. Reading. Lily was already asleep. She could hear the small white noise machine running behind Lily's door. She didn't take off her coat. "Who are you?" she said. Daniel looked up from the book. "Set it down." "And why did you agree to this?" He was quiet for a long time, long enough that she almost said something else. Then he stood, walked to the window, and looked out at the empty street. 10 years ago, he said, I built something, a network, financial, media, political infrastructure. Nothing official, nothing with a name. It was designed to be stabilizing, to absorb shocks before they became crises. A pause. It worked. She waited. The person I trusted most used it instead, for himself. Quietly at first, then not quietly at all. He turned from the window. His name was Marcus Hale. When I tried to dismantle what he'd built inside my own structure, he moved first. Everything I'd created, he turned against me. I had two choices. fight him publicly, which meant exposing the entire network, which would have caused more damage than the 2018 failure ever could. Or leave. You left. I left. His jaw shifted slightly. Lily was 3. Her mother had already gone. There was no version of fighting that didn't put her in the middle of it. Emily looked at him. And the marriage. He met her eyes. I still had one contact inside Marcia's office. When the Kellerman accounts froze, that was my doing. I needed to know who your family would turn to. I found out Marsh had 3 candidates. The other 2. He stopped. They would have used the position, used you. I made sure I was the name at the top of the list before they reached them. The heat came up in her chest before she could stop it. You don't get to make that decision for me, she said. The words came out hard and even. No, he said. I don't. You don't get to decide what I need protection from. You're right. You should have told me. Yes. He looked at her steadily. That's why I didn't tell you before. She understood what he meant, and understanding it made her angrier. Because he was right, and he knew he was right, and the whole architecture of it. The choice to protect her by staying silent, the choice to enter her life without explaining himself, was exactly the kind of elegant, maddening logic she'd seen in that Zurich photograph. She walked out of the room. She didn't slam the door. I wasn't one, Farah. She was passing Lily's room at 10:47 when she saw the light. Not the overhead. The small lamp on the windowsill. The one shaped like a cloud that Lily had apparently owned since she was 2, and that now lived permanently on the sill because, according to Lily, it needed to see outside. She stopped, looked through the gap in the door. Lily was sitting up in bed, not crying, not scared, just awake, holding the stuffed bear by one ear, looking at the window the way children look at things they're quietly trying to understand. Emily pushed the door open. Lily looked up, didn't seem surprised. Emily crossed the room and sat down on the edge of the bed. She didn't say anything. She didn't have anything to say. After a moment, Lily said, "Are you sad?" Emily looked at the window. The street outside. A car passing slowly. "I don't know what I am," she said, which was the most honest thing she had said out loud in weeks. Lily considered this seriously. "Dad sits like that when he's sad," she said. "He comes in here and just sits. He doesn't say anything either." She leaned slightly against Emily's arm. Not dramatically. Just enough. "I think maybe he just doesn't want to be by himself." Emily looked down at the top of Lily's head. Something in her chest, the part that had been held tight since October, since the file on her father's desk, since the photograph at the altar, loosened. Not all at once. Just slightly. The way a knot loosens when you stop pulling against it. She sat there until Lily fell asleep. She didn't build any walls on the way out. The message came on a Wednesday. Daniel found it on his phone at 6 in the morning, before Lily was awake, before the coffee had finished. He read it once, set the phone face down on the counter, stood at the kitchen window for a long time, looking at the maple tree in the yard, bare now, November having finished what October started. The message was from a number he hadn't seen in 10 years. "I know you're there. Come out or I tell them about the girl." Marcus Hale. Even the syntax was the same. That particular economy, no greeting, no threat elaborated beyond what was necessary. Marcus had always understood that the implied was more powerful than the stated. Daniel turned the phone back over. "Read it again." Then he began making Lily's lunch. By noon, Emily's name was on every major outlet. She saw it first on her phone, then on the television in her father's office, then reflected back at her in the expression on Gerald Marsh's face when she walked through the door. The chirons used words like implicated and linked to the careful, legally defensible language of accusation without proof. A photograph of her outside a building she didn't recognize, time-stamped on a day she had been in 3 other places. A quote from an unnamed source describing her as central to the family's financial operations. She had never been central to anything in this family. That was the part that landed hardest, not the lie itself. The specific shape of it, that they had chosen to make her powerful in the story, when the entire truth of her life here was that she had never been allowed to be. Her father was behind his desk. 2 advisors stood near the window. Marsh was at the door. "The best move," Marsh said, "is distance." Emily steps back, releases a statement saying she had no knowledge of. "She's in the room," Emily said. Marsh looked at her, adjusted his position slightly. Emily releases a statement. "She has a name," Emily said. "Use it or don't speak." Silence. Her father looked up from his desk. She had seen that expression directed at opponents, at journalists, at subordinates who had disappointed him. She had never seen him turn it on her, because she had always been the version of herself that was useful to him. She watched him recalibrate, watched him decide how much she mattered in this particular equation. He looked back down at the papers on his desk. That was the answer. She had picked up her bag and walked out. Daniel was in the backyard when she got home. Not doing anything. Just standing near the gate, the one he'd fixed, with his hands in his jacket pockets, looking at the middle distance in the way she'd come to recognize as thinking. Lily was at school. The street was quiet. She crossed the yard and stopped in front of him. "I know you can do something," she said. "I'm not asking how. I'm not asking why." She held his gaze. "I'm asking if you'll stand with me." He looked at her for a long moment. The wind moved through the empty branches above them. "Are you sure?" he said. "For the first time in my life," she said, "I'm sure about something." Something shifted in his face. Not dramatically. The way light changes in a room when a cloud moves, everything the same, but suddenly more itself. He nodded once. "Then go get Lily from school," he said. "Bring her home. I need 2 hours." He called a woman named Ruth. Emily didn't know who Ruth was. She learned later that Ruth had been Daniel's neighbor in Chicago, in the years before everything, and that she was 71 years old, and had never owned a computer, and had, in Daniel's words, nothing to do with any of this, which was exactly why he trusted her. Lily came home at 3:15, found a packed overnight bag on her bed, and looked at her father. "Am I going to Ruth's?" she asked. "Just for a night," Daniel said. He crouched down to her level. "Maybe 2. Lily studied him with her father's way of reading a room, that same quiet, thorough attention that missed nothing. "Is something bad happening?" "Something is being handled," Daniel said. Lily seemed to accept this as a sufficient distinction. She picked up the bag. Then she put her arms around his neck and held on for a moment, and Daniel's eyes closed briefly. Something behind his composure that he only let through when he thought no one was watching. "Come get me soon," Lily said into his shoulder. "Promise." "I promise." Lily stepped back, looked at Emily, who was standing in the doorway. "Come get me too," she said. Matter of fact, already moving toward the door. Emily's throat tightened. She didn't say anything. She didn't trust what would come out. She stood at the door long after Lily had gone, her hand still on the frame, that small voice sitting somewhere in her chest where it hadn't been before. For the next 48 hours, she watched a man dismantle a trap from the inside. She didn't see most of it. That was the nature of it. Daniel worked in the space between visible things. He made calls she overheard in fragments. He was at his laptop from 10 at night until 2 in the morning, 2 nights running. He slept 4 hours, woke without an alarm, made coffee without speaking. She brought him a plate of food at midnight on the first night, set it beside the laptop without comment. He ate without looking up, said quietly, "Thank you." She went back to her room, sat on the edge of her bed in the dark for a while, not ready to sleep. Through the wall, she could hear the faint sound of him working. Keys, a low voice, silence, keys again. Methodical, unhurried. She thought about Lily saying, "Come get me too," with the same ease she asked for cereal. As though it were obvious. As though Emily had always been someone worth coming back for. She lay down. Didn't sleep for a long time. What she understood, piecing it together afterward. Marcus Hale had built his attack across 3 channels he assumed were independent of each other. The leaked documents. The fabricated evidence against Emily. The financial pressure on her father's remaining allies. 3 weapons fired simultaneously, designed to make defense impossible, because defending one meant leaving the other 2 open. What Marcus had not accounted for was that Daniel had spent 10 years knowing exactly how Marcus thought. He didn't defend. He traced. Every document Marcus had leaked contained a metadata signature, pointing back through a chain of intermediaries to a single source, a law firm with offices in Georgetown and Zurich that handled the financial interests of the Thompson Coalition. Daniel surfaced that chain in a form that 3 separate journalists could independently verify, which meant no single outlet could be pressured into silence. The first story ran Thursday morning. By Thursday afternoon, 2 more had followed. By the end of that week, Marcus Hale's name was the story. On the financial side, the investment group behind the attack held significant positions in several markets that their own accusations, if believed, would have destabilized. Daniel moved in ways that made that contradiction visible. Not illegal. Not aggressive. He simply made it impossible for the numbers to lie in 2 directions at once. The market did the rest. Emily held the press conference on Friday at noon. No advisors. No prepared statement written by someone else. She stood at a podium outside her father's campaign office, which she had chosen deliberately because she was not hiding from who her family was, and she spoke for 11 minutes. She addressed each accusation by name. She provided documentation for her whereabouts on the dates in question. She cited the metadata analysis already published that morning by 2 independent journalists. And at the end, she said clearly, without looking at notes, Marcus Hale has spent 10 years building influence by tearing down the people around him. I'm inviting him to dispute anything I've said today. In public. On record. I'll be here. Marcus Hale did not appear. His office released a statement through a publicist at 4 in the afternoon. 3 sentences. It explained nothing. By the following Tuesday, the Financial Oversight Committee had issued a formal inquiry into the Thompson Coalition's lobbying activities. Marcus Hale's name appeared in the first paragraph. Her father called her the following Saturday. "The marriage," he said. "No one would blame you. Given everything, you could." "I'll talk to you next week," she said. She ended the call. She sat with the phone in her hand for a moment. Outside the window, the street was gray and cold and completely ordinary. A neighbor walked a dog. A car pulled out of a driveway. Nothing about any of it suggested that 2 weeks ago, her name had been on every television in the country. She set the phone down and went to find Daniel. He was in the living room. The laptop was closed for the first time in days. He was just sitting, jacket off, one arm along the back of the couch, looking at nothing in particular. She sat down across from him. "You shut it down," she said. She didn't mean the laptop. Yes. All of it? Everything I reactivated. The rest has been dormant for years. It can stay that way. She watched his face. You could keep it. Use it. I know. Most people would. I know that too. He was quiet for a moment. I built it to stabilize things, not to run them. There's a difference. His jaw shifted slightly. Marcus never understood that difference. That was how I knew, eventually, that it would go wrong. Emily looked at him. Are you going to disappear again? He turned from the window, met her eyes directly. Only if there's no reason to stay. The room was quiet. The heating clicked on somewhere in the walls. She understood what he was saying, and she understood that he would not say it more plainly than that, not because he was afraid, but because he had learned, the hard way, the cost of wanting things he couldn't guarantee. He was not a man who asked for what he wasn't certain he could be given. She didn't answer immediately. She let the silence be what it was. Ruth's house was 40 minutes north, on a street called Elm that had no elms on it anymore. They drove up together on a Sunday morning. Daniel drove. Emily watched the landscape shift from city to suburb to the particular quiet of a neighborhood where people had lived long enough to stop noticing each other. Ruth met them at the door, a small woman with gray hair and the posture of someone who had decided decades ago not to be surprised by anything. She handed Daniel a coffee without being asked. Lily came running from somewhere in the back of the house. She stopped when she saw them both standing together on the porch. Then she said, very practically, you came, both of you. Both of us, Daniel said. Lily looked at Emily. Did you bring my bear? I forgot my bear. It's in the bag, Emily said. Lily grabbed the bag, found the bear, held it up to verify its condition, and declared it acceptable. Then she ran back inside to get her shoes. Ruth looked at Daniel. Then at Emily. Her expression was the kind that had long since given up performing. Come inside, she said. I made too much food. The drive home was quiet. Lily fell asleep in the back seat 20 minutes in, the bear tucked under her chin, both arms wrapped around it the way she held things she wanted to keep. The highway was empty in the way Sundays are empty. Not abandoned, just resting. Daniel drove. Emily watched the road. At some point, she became aware that she wasn't thinking about what came next. She wasn't calculating, or managing, or preparing for anything. She was just sitting in a car on a Sunday with the heater running and a child asleep in the back seat. It was the most ordinary thing she had done in years. She couldn't explain why it made something in her chest settle the way it did, quiet and final and without drama, like a stone finding the floor of a lake. They got home at 4:30. Lily woke up when the car stopped, declared she was hungry, and walked inside ahead of both of them. Daniel followed. Emily came last and stood for a moment on the porch. The same porch with two chairs, the maple tree bare now, the side gate latched, before going in. The house smelled like whatever Daniel had started in the slow cooker that morning. Lily was already at the kitchen table, drawing, a crayon in each hand, alternating between them with the focused patience of someone who knew exactly what she wanted and was taking her time getting there. Emily came to stand beside her. The drawing was 3 figures. Stick figures, roughly the same height, standing close together. Crayon yellow hair on one. No particular detail on the others. Simple as a child's understanding of a family, which is to say, without any complication at all. That's us, Lily said without looking up. I made us all the same size because I couldn't remember who was taller. Emily looked at the drawing for a long moment. Daniel set a bowl on the table. Then another. Then a third. He didn't ask. She pulled out the chair and sat down. For the first time since the wedding, since the file on her father's desk, since the flowers she hadn't chosen, since the man she hadn't known, Emily Carter sat at a table that felt like hers. Not because of a contract. Not because of a name. Because she had chosen to. That was all. That was everything. Some people enter your life looking like nothing. No title, no record, no explanation that makes sense. Just a quiet man, holding a child's backpack, standing at the edge of a world that never understood him, and never needed to. We spend so much of our lives being chosen by other people's plans, handed to situations we didn't design, carrying names that were never really ours, performing versions of ourselves that fit someone else's story. Emily didn't find freedom by escaping. She found it by finally, for the first time, sitting down at a table and choosing to stay. That's what healing looks like most of the time. Not a dramatic exit, not a grand declaration, just a quiet moment when you stop leaving the room, when you let something ordinary feel like enough, when you realize the life you've been waiting for permission to live has been here all along, in a house on a street you didn't choose, with people who never asked you to be anything other than exactly who you are. The most powerful thing you can do is choose. Not because you have to, because you want to. If something in this story stayed with you, a moment, a line, a feeling you couldn't quite name, drop it in the comments. We read every single one. And if you believe quiet stories like this deserve to be heard, a like and a subscription mean more than you know. It's what keeps us here, telling them. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next one.